Right, I make it 8 o'clock. So, shall we give it a go?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do this. So, evening, everybody that is in the room. Some people have literally just come on board as well, which is good. We'll probably get a couple more dropping in as we go on. And obviously, for people that are joining later on, that are going to be watching the recording from on the YouTube channel. So tonight we are looking at a selection of Ardnamurchan whiskies, which I put together. Basically, whenever Ardnamurchan do a new release, I put one aside, thinking I'm going to do a tasting with this at some point because they're consistently brilliant. I love pretty much everything that they do. And I basically got to the point where when the mezcal came out, I had a nice lineup of six that it was a case of, right, let's do it. And what was handy was we five of the six essentially were part of the cask releases. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to look at the effects of those casks on I suppose it's essentially that core whiskey. Now, when I put the blurb out, I did say we've got the 10-year-old, which was the first age statement from them, as a sort of baseline. But even the 10-year-old is a little bit different. Theoretically, I should have technically put the core on. But because the 10-year-old was basically went like that, and not that many people managed to get hold of the bottle, I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to sort of try that and almost see another slightly unusual release that Ardnamurchan have done. So we're not necessarily looking at the 10-year-old as this is the baseline that we use for the cask releases. But it will certainly give you an idea of what they can come up with, and then the cash releases will be essentially a side by side comparison. And we've also got the 2023 Sherry cash release, which again I kept aside with a view of putting on a tasting, and it never really happened last year. And then the 24 came out, and that's one that I'm kind of hoping we can look at. Literally, if you've got two glasses, we can do the 23, the 24, literally side by side, because I found there was a marked difference between the two. And it'd be really interesting to see people's thoughts on it, because I have opinions. But we are also very lucky to have Graeme Mackay, who is the brand ambassador, sales manager, figurehead of Ardnamurchan, what he doesn't know about Ardnamurchan isn't worth knowing anyway. And general all round top bloke and one of the nicest guys in the whiskey industry. So I'm essentially going to leave it to him. We do have a chat available if you do want to put any questions in the chat, and then I'll potentially kind of like dive in with those as and when the time allows. But we'll also, as we go through, I'll kind of open it up to the room to get people's thoughts and opinions as we're trying each individual sample as well. Graeme has got the capability of putting slides up and things like that. So he's got some pictures and bits and pieces that he can show you. I'll basically hand it over to you, buddy, and let you do your thing.
Nice one. Thanks, Ben. And yeah, hello everyone. I hope you're doing well on this Saturday evening. I've just managed to hide in my spare room while my wife's putting the kids to bed, so I'm just anything I'm hearing from through there, I am ignoring, and I will owe it to her later on. And I'm going to throw my phone away as well. So really nice to be here. It's been a long time since I've done a Zoom tasting. Actually, I don't know about you guys when you last did one, but obviously, this time 5 years ago, we were doing many, many, many Zoom tastings, and we got quite used to it. And now the opposite. I'm used to doing them in person again, but they do have a certain charm, and it means we can all tune in from the comfort of our homes or wherever we happen to find ourselves tonight. I've seen some familiar faces as well. Stephen knows just about as much about Ardnamurchan as I do, so you can fill in any of the blanks. And really nice to be here. So what I would say is, to be honest, right off the bat, get stuck in with questions. I really want honest feedback in any tasting that we do. We will try to be totally transparent about what we do as a company. Like Ben said, I think we've got a nice range tonight of different directions that our spirit can take. Quite often these cask releases that we do are maybe only two, three of them a year that are different. So it's nice to collect them all together and have a go at them. Some of these are pretty recent releases. Some of them are from at least 2 years ago and are all but gone in the UK and most of the world. So it'd be great to do a little comparison of them. So what we'll start off with, if you want to pour yourself the first dram and get it opening up, is the 10-year-old. I did pour myself one a little while ago. And yeah, just to suss out your kind of knowledge of Ardnamurchan, could you stick up your hands on the screen if you've never tried an Ardnamurchan product before? Is this brand new to anyone? Christine and Co on the couch there. Okay. Has anyone in the opposite side of it, has anyone been to Ardnamurchan Distillery before? Stephen has. Okay, cool. Well, Stephen can agree with me as we go on. It's in the middle of nowhere, right? It's a pretty remote spot. When were you actually there, Stephen?
Yeah, to this day, my family still don't really talk to me because I kind of dragged them all there. And it really is. It's some of the most windy roads you're ever going to face in the UK.
Aye.
I think it was
right.
It was March 23. I think I made it. March 23.
Cool. Well, I know your pain. I took my whole family there for a week last week in the half-term holidays for a husband's holiday for myself. But we I brought my mum and my brother and the wife and kids, and yeah, great to show them this part of the world. So
it's a gorgeous part of the world.
Yeah, well, I'll show you guys. I've got a presentation that I'm just going to dive in and out of. I don't want to overload you with sales rubbish today. So consider this just... What I really want to do is, first of all, I'll show you on the map where we are. If I start this presentation, let's see. Can you see that on full screen there just now?
Yeah, we got it.
Cool. And some floating heads around the outside of it. So don't worry about paying too much attention to all of this. But yes, Ardnamurchan and Adelphi are one and the same. So that's the first thing to touch upon. We're not trying any Adelphi tonight, but Adelphi is the backbone of the company. It's the history of the company. It's an independent bottler, of course, and that's been going on for coming up to 32 years now, actually. So we've been quietly building up quite a nice reputation around the world for primarily buying and bottling single cask whiskies. Not always Scotch. In fact, right at the front of this picture, you've got a Spirit of Yorkshire there from Filey Bay. We've got a Schmogen from Sweden. I've got an Akeshi from Japan in that picture, and a Caroni rum as well, in fact. So we've got... Basically, if it tastes good, we will consider bottling it and letting people have access to it. But tonight we're going to focus on Ardnamurchan Distillery. I don't know if this floating bar of mine is getting in your way or not. Let's move it. So the blue dot, that is where Ardnamurchan Distillery and indeed Ardnamurchan Peninsula is. So it is named after the peninsula. We wouldn't have chosen that name otherwise, I think it's probably fair to say. It's not exactly one that rolls off the tongue for everybody, but absolutely spectacular part of the world. It is on the mainland. When I drive up there, I actually live south of the border as well. I'm not too far from Newcastle nowadays, and I'm going there on Monday. So I'll drive up to Glasgow, and then beyond Glasgow, you're in just the most amazing scenery, right up Loch Lomond, through Glencoe, and then it gets good from there even, you could argue. You cross the Corran Ferry here, and then, believe it or not, you've got another hour to drive about another maybe 25, 30 miles from there. Single track roads, some of the best wildlife and beaches and scenery in the UK, and very much an island style of life there. It's in fact, it makes me remember a few years ago we had Cameron and Ranald up from Campbelltown, from Cadenheads and Springbank, bearing in mind where Campbelltown is, and they drove up to us and said, Christ, this is in the middle of nowhere, isn't it? And I was like, guys, you live in Campbelltown. But they rightly said, they've got a town attached to their distillery. So we are very sparsely populated, 300-400 people living in that entire peninsula. So really a beautiful place to visit, whether you like visiting the distillery or not. But we'll dwell on a bit of that as we go on. Before we try the 10-year-old, that's just saying that Ardnamurchan Lighthouse is the furthest west you can go in the UK. I want to just show you a very quick video. I don't rely on these too often, believe me, but I think this will sum up the area and the distillery, and it'll give you a good picture before we do a deep dive into the distillate. Can you hear that as well, Ben?
Can't hear it, mate.
Okay, it's fine. It's just basic music anyway, but hopefully you can see it.
On an asylum seeker gets 3 wishes at Dover. We get this green light or a sap. Darling asylum seeker, greeted at Dover by good ferry. Congrats.
Taste the story. Managed to sneak in some marketing nonsense there for you. But we'll revert back to the slideshow in a wee minute. But hopefully that gives you a nice sense of the area. And of course, it is as beautifully picturesque and blue skies 365 days a year out there. So to get into the whiskey, we want to try our 10-year-old pretty quickly. So I don't want to talk at you much more, but just to sum up what we do peated whiskey and we do unpeated whiskey. So if we think about our whiskey neighborhood, we started in 2014. We built the distillery in 2013. And that was a reflection, I guess, on the independent bottling world getting a little bit busier, a little bit more crowded and competitive. Prices going quite high over the last few years as well in terms of cask purchasing. And availability dropping as well. You know, lots of distilleries over the years starting to say, well, we're not going to sell to indies anymore because we require all of our whiskey for ourselves, plus the other indies that are cropping up fighting for the same stock, you know. So taking control of our own future and deciding by this point, after 20 years of operation, we think, or the company thought, that they knew enough about what whiskey they like and what they don't like and why they like it and why they don't like certain whiskies, that they could maybe have a crack at making their own distillate. So we're trying to make a very much Western Highland style of malt. We're trying to make a whiskey which is an embodiment of that place that we just saw in the video there. So we'll start off with a 10-year-old, and then we can go back a few steps and start to talk about certain things we do, certain flavors, certain textures we might promote at the distillery as well. But it's a really, for me, a great one to start off with is going to be the Ardnamurchan 10, okay? So I will show you a picture of it, but this is what it looks like in real life. And yeah, AD 10. AD is Ardnamurchan Distillery. And this was the birthday release, the big birthday celebration in the summer of last year this launched. So we're just any day now actually going to turn 11. There won't be an AD 11 coming out alongside it, by the way. The 10 was a kind of a one-off milestone achievement, you know. We're not necessarily getting bogged down on age statements and things, but I think the 10 was worthy of celebration and putting together a batch to celebrate kind of surviving that amount of time. So what we have here, this is going to be the only dram we try tonight that's 100% unpeated. So in 2014, we didn't do any peated malt. So that choice was made for us already. And I should let you know as well that I'm on the blending team. So primarily I'm on the sales team and I look after lots of the UK, lots of Europe, parts of Asia. We're a very, very small independent team. I mean, right now my colleague Connell is in Japan. My other colleague is in Dallas in the US. And then there's two more of us. And that's the world sales team, which covers 45 markets around the globe. So I think what was interesting was when we started getting our first recipes together, Alex Bruce, who's the managing director, and really the direction of the company and the design of the distillery all came from his head, really. He decided he could have quite easily appointed himself as the master blender and taken all the credit and had his signature on the bottle and things, right? However, certainly for me, selfishly, he made a nice choice and he said, we're going to get the sales and marketing team to join me and to become the blending team. So every dram we're going to try tonight, I can remember the day that we sat down in the boardroom and we mixed some things together. When I'm talking about blends, I don't want to be too obvious, but at the same time, I don't want to leave anyone behind. So if there's anything I'm talking about that confuses you, just ask, okay? But blending, in every case tonight, we're talking still about single malts, okay? But we're talking about vattings of, we've not got any single casks tonight. So the AD10, when it came to do the blend, we had unpeated, was our only option. And we had primarily what we produce at the distillery is bourbon and sherry, or what we mature in is bourbon and sherry. We're pretty traditional in that regard. And then these other things that we're going to try tonight, your rums, your mezcals, your madeiras, we venture outwards from bourbon and sherry sometimes, but the house style, the house DNA is very much centered around old school, peated and unpeated, mostly combined, I have to say, but sometimes kept separate, and then matured in bourbon and sherry. So the first one we're going to try is primarily bourbon. It does, however, have an interesting curveball. Has anyone ever tried our Paul Lanois, Champagne Paul Lanois collaborations that we do? So that is it's a champagne company. Paul is the name. I guess he must be about 13 years old now, Paul Lanois. He's the son of the winemakers, Julien and Sarah Lanois. Stephen's got a bottle there. Very nice.
Several bottles. I have a real problem when it comes to Ardnamurchan.
It's become kind of the jewel in our crown. You could argue. Some people certainly chase it down. I've even got some bottles of their actual champagne in the house. But the reason we've included them here is every year since we launched, which was in September 2020. So we're coming up to 5 years since we've launched our first whiskey. We have done an annual champagne matured release. And of course, if we're being really strict about it, champagne casks don't exist. They're not a thing. But what we do have is a very close collaboration with a champagne producer, and we're buying 10 nowadays in the last year or two, up to over 20 casks a year from them. And in reality, they are Chardonnay white wine barriques. And it really started off, I wish I'd brought one through with me. It started off as a bit of an experiment. If you were already on board with us back in COVID times, we started off with a launch of 4 miniatures, the first AD kit, the first of many terrible jokes and puns that we've adopted as a company. But I just literally was clearing out some samples today, and I found this original 5cl of Paul Lanois that we included on our first ever miniature pack. And that's what we originally used to send around the world and to say to people, here's our first ever inaugural whiskey, here's a bourbon, here's a sherry. Here we go. Stephen's like my Debbie McGee today.
I'm your top guy. I polished opposite, and then at auction recently, these come up for about 25, 30 quid sometimes. So
okay, yeah.
I rebought a set.
Cool.
That's ridiculously cheap as well for that.
It's great. I don't know if that's a champagne when I pulled out, but it's a nice little dumpy bottle.
So there was 4 of them, and the 4th one, we didn't know what to put in there. So Alex kind of said, let's chuck in this little champagne cask and see, basically, to use the world as a focus group and see what people think, see if it's any good. And immediately, the feedback was incredible. People were going mad for it, and it immediately cemented, let's buy more casks, let's commit to this collaboration every year, let's move forward with the plans of actually releasing one. So it's a lot of information. I'm aware of that I'm dumping a lot at you just now, but it's important to say, because we have Paul Lanois barriques in this cask makeup, because Paul Lanois has become such a such a key part of our story, such a release that people look forward to every year. So when I was deciding with my colleagues on the final recipe for this dram that we've got, we had to do bourbon. We wanted to do bourbon. We wanted it to be a very bold, kind of distillate-led product and to be a very characterful example of our oldest whiskey that we have in the warehouse. We had the option of some 10-year-old sherries, and then the only other option we had was we had re-racked some 9-year-old bourbons into these champagne barriques, these Chardonnay barriques. And we had, therefore, some options of different prototypes to combine 2 or 3 or just one of those. And in the end, by a country mile, we all voted for leaving the sherry out. The sherry was pretty dominant, pretty intense. And we thought the bourbon and the Paul and Noir combination went really well together. So in the end, what you have, and I'll show you on the is, I've just got my little sheets here. Can you see that one there? Is that showing you the 10-year-old on screen now? Cool.
Yep.
So I'll show you the specifics below here. And at the very bottom, we've kind of got our whiskey breakdown. Now, of course, you can actually see this if you have a real bottle of any of our releases in your house. We specialize in transparency. So you can scan this QR code and it will tell you all of this information plus more. It'll really go in depth. But what we have is 50% ABV, all 10-year-old and above. 50% of it roughly is just full-time 10-year-old bourbon casks. The other 50% is 9-year-old in bourbon and then finished for about 15 months in these Paul and Noir barriques. Now, there is a bunch of tasting notes here. There are tasting notes there, but ignore them. I don't want to dwell on them yet. I want you guys to dive in and to have a very kind of unbiased go. I've not told you anything about the style of spirit that we produce in terms of flavors and characteristics. So I would love to hear your completely honest opinion on this one. For me, it's still the highlight of what we've ever released for me. This is really my style. It's a window into these dunnage warehouses that we have on Ardnamurchan Peninsula, and it shows you that little window into what does our oldest spirit taste like. You know, most of the drams we're going to try tonight are between sort of 5 and 7 years old. This is the one that's got that slight bump of age, and there is a big difference, obviously, between 5, 7, and 10 in terms of depth and complexity. So does anyone have any thoughts on it? I mean, some of you, it may well not be the first time you've tried it, but feel free to venture forth with opinions, positive and negative, all welcome.
I'm always surprised when I remember that this is unpeated, because I could swear I could get some. It's almost like there's a very small element of peated spirit in it, and I think it's the Noir element that kind of there's like loads of fruit going on, like pineapple almost over, like pineapple and papaya and like tropical fruit notes, but there's this weird kind of like almost like, and I don't know if I'm getting it subconsciously because it's Noir champagne, but there's almost this sparkling feel to it that kind of is there in the background.
It's amazing how many people say that to us.
Yeah.
I've just copy and pasted the tasting notes that we wrote as a team into the chat there. Now that I see it, you can happily take the piss out of me because I wrote these tasting notes. What we normally do is 5 or 6 of us will write our own notes. If we can, we will have a Zoom session and we'll try all the new releases, including Adelphi's. Between 5 or 6 of us will sit and throw words at each other for about 3 hours, and it'll descend into absolute mayhem by the end of it. But then it's usually my job to try and pull those things together and make a sentence out of them. I have to say, straight off the bat, we do not take our tasting notes too seriously. They're designed to be quite fun. And of course, they're extremely subjective, right? So you can happily disagree. I will not be offended at all if you think it's a bunch of nonsense. And that's why tasting notes don't feature on the bottle. It's very much a personal opinion, but it gives you a loose idea of what you might be tasting. But for me, I think that Ben was right on the money saying it's almost as if it's got peat. I think it shows you this West Coast style of dram that we're trying to produce. It is very earthy. It's very, we use the word farmy and funky quite a lot, and yeah, nearly getting into this waxy world, which is more of a textural thing. But that's in some people's minds, that's like the holy grail of whiskey. If we can get to that waxy, viscous, fatty mouthfeel of a dram, we would be absolutely delighted. So yeah, and Julian there saying yeasty notes, totally agree. That's the Chardonnay casks is really bumping up that bready characteristics, the leesy thing. If you're in the wine world, you would say maybe leesy on that yeasty side, but it's also super fresh. I don't know. For me, honestly, I just love the nose in particular. I could really enjoy this whiskey without even tasting it. It's just got such a deep nose, and I think for some people when it was first released, they thought, "Oh, where's the sherry?" You know, and I was quite confidently saying to people, "This is still a bold whiskey. It's still, it's still got bags of flavor. It's not a big punch in the face." But I think it was hopefully a bold idea to just say this is the nearly naked spirit, and we've not hidden behind smoke. We've not hidden behind sherry. It's pretty unadorned. It's just the natural experience of what we produce at that distillery.
I think bottling at 50% works really well as well. I can imagine it. Not that you would go that low, but if you started doing this at like 40, 43, it would lose a lot of character. I think that higher ABV accentuates those bready characters and that those higher notes that are in there. So yeah, it's not one I'd say, oh, it definitely needs water. I think it absolutely is putting it at 50 just boosts everything in the right way.
Yeah, yeah. Body is extremely important in whiskey. It's something I'm learning more about every year, but we'll get onto that a bit as we go on. But we believe, we hope that we create an oily spirit, and we don't often dwell on the texture when we're having a dram, but we should. And it is there in your experience, whether you're aware of it or not. But liquid does have a texture. It's not just food that has texture. So I guess the easiest thing to think of, well, what's the opposite of oils? It's water, right? And you could have a watery, thin dram that's still very enjoyable, of course. But if you can get that weight, that fattiness in there, then it helps with driving those flavors home and increasing the enjoyment of the whiskey, to be fair. So
I think that's sometimes the problem with grain whiskies for me. Like they can be very tasty, sometimes a bit, monotonous, but they never have the body. They never have the waxiness.
Yeah, that's that column distillate for you. And as you say, they can be completely super delicious, especially on the nose sometimes if you get a nice old grain whiskey, that tropical notes that can fly through. Okay. But yeah, you can have quite a short finish and yeah, I think if you get the viscosity right, you just naturally want to have another dram of it. It's just a Moorish way to do it.
I love
stick a little bit of MSG in. Little MSG powder in, that sort of thing. That'd probably help.
Yeah.
Look, if it works for a Chinese takeaway, it'll work for you guys.
Hey, I literally use MSG in my kitchen all the time.
You're not supposed to snort it, Graeme.
It's keeping me awake, all right? So yeah, I hope you like it. We also made quite what would I say? The choice was made very early on to do as low a price as we could. So it was around about £65 RRP. And it was also about, I've got the exact numbers here, about 15,000 bottles in the batch, which in one fell swoop, goodbye to 50% of our oldest stock in that batch. So we made a big choice straight away. We want this to be as widely available as possible. We want it to be a bold distillery-led product, and we want it to be an affordable price. in theory, we might have got away with double that price because it was our big birthday release, But we do not want to take the piss with price. We want it to be drinking whiskies, and that's been a core kind of backbone of Ardnamurchan from day one. Is we want the whiskey to be affordable and to be drinkable. We want you to open these bottles at the end of the day. So
Have they all gone? I'm looking at the moment to see if there is
they've all
any.
they've all gone on my side.
Yeah,
They are. Another shout
I
out.
can't see.
Oh, I got my price wrong before that low, so it was 35. But in auctions, the bottle has fallen as low as £45 plus
Nice,
10-year-old.
good.
So I've got it on my watch list. And next time it does that, I'm definitely snapping one up because mine's gone.
I have to say, there
Great
is
bottle.
nothing that I enjoy more than seeing one of our whiskies sell at under retail on an auction site. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a good time to buy whiskey. It's very
Yeah,
dangerous.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Cool. So, should we move on to dram number two? We're
Let's
at
do it.
half eight, and we've only had one, but the information's heavy at the start, and then we'll slowly recline as the night goes on. Don't worry. Um, so we'll move the 10 out of the way. Are we going on to the Madeira or the
Madeira.
rum?
Yeah, the Madeira. I went back and forth when I was kind of trying to figure out the lineup for this, and this was the bit where, and normally if it's a 50-50, I will go the wrong way. So it's entirely possible that we should be doing the rum first. I just think the sweetness of the rum came the sweeter notes. I think I'm hoping will work better after this slightly dry style of Madeira. But yeah, feel
Yeah.
free to tell me I've got it the wrong way because normally I do.
Equally, the tasting notes tasting lineups rather are always open to interpretation, and they can always be changed, right? So, um, yeah. So Ardnamurchan Madeira cask. I'll show you a proper picture of it in a wee second. But this came out just earlier this year. It was January, February that this one debuted. And this is officially our second ever Madeira release. We did one in October 2022, but this is different. Back then, that was one of our first. It was the first, in fact, non-bourbon and sherry Ardnamurchan, if you exclude the little champagne avenue that we go down sometimes. And it was released with only unpeated spirit back then, and it was cask strength. This time round, it's the first time we've got peated Madeira casks involved, and it's 52% ABV, so it's a little bit more refined. I find when I go back to the old one, it's a bit more punchy, it's a little bit more brash. And you know what's quite interesting is that I think, in hindsight, hopefully we know what we're doing a little bit more a few years down the line. Um, Very happy to say, we would never call ourselves master blenders. We are six amateur blenders who maybe make up a blender between us put together, but all we're doing is learning every day. And we're also learning how our spirit behaves in combination with different cask types, but also the production side. The production team are learning every day as well. And we've got some long-standing staff members that have been with us since way before our first whiskey was released. And they are fine-tuning what they're doing every single day. So I've got a very nice job some days when I'm at the blending table where I get just unbelievable consistency of spirit. And particularly if I get a big bunch of unpeated bourbons and then peated bourbons back to back, it's very rare that I find faults or I find them to be needing rejected. Sometimes very simply we'll reject them if they need more time in the cask. But we've got this wonderful consistent approach, and I think production teams should always be publicly mentioned for that because they put in the hard yards. I'm sitting at home in my house while there's literally still a few people working in the distillery at this time of night, still producing spirit. So we work till about 10 o'clock at night. And yeah, they don't get all the credit they need sometimes because they're stuck hiding in this rural location. So let me take you a bit deeper into what this specific whiskey is. I'll just share it with you.
We have a fan already in the chat, Christine. I think Christine likes this.
That's good to see. Wow, in a good way, yes, that's always reassuring.
Yeah.
Not not wow, I'm going to disconnect.
Yeah, well, what is this nonsense? Yeah, yeah, this is a good wow.
Excellent. So, can you see that clearly? I've only got one screen open today instead of two, so I'm always worried my windows are getting in the way of it. But can you
Yeah, we
see?
can see it, mate. Yep.
So, down the left-hand side, you'll see the official spec. So just shy of 20,000 bottles, quite a big batch this time round. About the same RRP of the 10. And then if we go further down, re-racked into Madeira. So it's very common for us when we go outside of bourbon and sherry that we will do finished whiskey, that we'll re-rack the whiskey from bourbon into these other types. So this has been finished for over 2 years. I think it was 26, 27 months in the end by the time it got bottled. And you've nearly got a 40, 60% split there. So I'm aware, by the way, that can seem confusing. We mature them separately. So we have taken 43% of it was peated spirit, matured separately, and mixed with 57% unpeated spirit. But I have to say, something that we'll build on as the night goes on is I think all of our peated whiskey, almost all of it without exception, even if it's 100% peated, we've got a cask strength release that's nearly 100% peated bourbons. Even when I tell people that, you have a nose of it and you think, not that smoky, not too peaty at all. I had two people at my tasting in Newcastle last night who immediately said they didn't like peated whiskey. And I thought, well, 7 of the 8 drams tonight are peated. You might be in for a long night. But I was also quite hopeful that, in my experience, a lot of people who don't like Isla drams and the big, monstrously peated whiskies can still handle this mainland peat. So our peat is coming from the kind of Grampian region, Aberdeenshire sort of way, and the composition of that peat. You have to view your peat as an ingredient in itself, and literally where that peat has been formed over millions of years, that's what it tastes like. So that's why Isla literally tastes like Isla, and that's why it's got seaweed and medicinal notes and the famous TCP and the real punch. Our peat, much more gentle, bonfire embers, quite well integrated. Even our 100% peated spirit is more refined. It's more gentle. It is 30 ppm, our peated malt, I should say, but we should always remember ppm is a guideline rather than a Bible to follow. It doesn't tell you much more than just what it started off as. So 7 years old as well, I should say, by the way. And yeah, you can see again, I'll copy my official tasting notes here into the chat, and we can see on a scale of 0 to full tasting note wankiness how close we're getting there, eh? But we'll see what you think of it.
I see Julian's come up with toffee apples and tobacco, which is a really good tasting note because there's that kind of, like, and as Stephen says, like burnt caramel, but that toffee apple or top of a creme brulee, that sort of thing, kind of smoky note coming through. And it's interesting you talking about people saying that they don't like peated whiskey. It's a common thing that happens in the shop is, some people will say, oh, I don't like peated whiskey, but I do like smoky whiskey, or the other way around. And it's kind of right. Well, the peat is what's causing the smoke, and it's getting people to. I think there's this kind of like, peated whiskey is a kind of catch-all term for a particular. It's kind of like you use the word peated, where actually they're using, as you say, Isla. And I sort of say to people, well, there's different types of smoke. You've got bonfire smoke, you've got barbecue smoke, you've got you've got the smoke, the exhaust smoke, you've got all sorts. The medicinal smoke. So many different types, and to go, you just don't like smoke is really kind of, there's a broad range of flavors and aromas that's coming there, where there's a good chance that there's probably going to be something within that spectrum that actually you will like. And I sometimes say to people that, they go, oh, I don't like peated whiskey, I don't like smoky whiskey, I don't want to go near it. And I say, well, do you like barbecues? do you like smoked meats? Oh yeah, I love smoked meats. It's like, well, actually, okay, steer clear of Islay, but there are, like this as a smoked meat flavor. Lechek I always associate with barbecue sauce and things like that. And once they start kind of going, oh right, okay, it's not that I don't like peated whiskey. I don't like that particular style. I don't like the pepperiness of Talisker, or I don't like the medicinal side. And then those degrees, like you say, this is your peated spirits 30 ppm, but that's not a 30 ppm peated whiskey. It's it's everything else that's going into it that's dampening it down or taking it in different directions. And this is there are those kind of gateway whiskies, of which this is one, which is like, oh, maybe I do like smoky whiskey, and I just need to kind of use this as a stepping stone to trying other things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you say, the ppm has been cut in half almost immediately by using unpeated spirit there, and then as the years go on, the peat dissipates as well. So it's a much more complex thing than just. I mean, peat is almost the most complex thing in whiskey. I mean, we have many complex things, but when we talk about ppms, we should always remember that's parts per million, and the intensity of that flavor is such that we can detect it even when it's present in tiny, tiny amounts. And also it's so intense that it's about the only flavor that you introduce at the very beginning of the process that survives and is so robust right until the end of the process. Distillation is quite a brutal chemical process. It creates a lot of new flavors, but it also destroys a lot of what came before it. We do, of course, we can go down the rabbit hole of the new make characteristics, and in particular the fermentation side and the barley varieties and the yields and all these things. They have a huge impact on the flavor. But peat is just such a heavy flavor. But I think that's a great point actually to make, Ben, is if you relate it to smoked food, everyone has tried smoked food in their life. So smoked liquid doesn't seem so unusual after that. In fact, I was looking after a group of 30 Icelandic guys came across to the distillery a few weeks ago. Basically, Iceland was empty, I think, because they all came to see Ardnamurchan. But two of them were my importers, who I sell whiskey to over there, and then they brought a big group of really serious whiskey nerds. And we went over to theirs for a barbecue afterwards. They'd hired this nice house on the peninsula, and I was saying, how do you find the peat? And they were saying, oh, in Iceland, we eat smoke all the time. Most of our food is smoked to one degree or another, so we're very familiar with this as something on our palate. But for some people, it takes some getting used to. Madeira, worth a very quick jaunt down the Madeira rabbit hole. I wouldn't go too far into it, but I presume that we're probably familiar with Madeira. But I do always like to shine a light on some of these that need. There you go, Stephen, exactly. We need to sometimes remember that some of these fortified wines, and then some of the other stuff we're going to try later, are delicious liquids in their own right as well. So Madeira and sherry, I will always get on the soapbox about and say, buy more of this, appreciate it more. And actually, I'm still surprised. I'm sorry, my camera's going to focus a little bit there. I'm always surprised by the amount of people who are big whiskey geeks who haven't necessarily tried sherry or tried Madeira or some of the components, and it's a great way to join the dots. Let me see if I turn a light on, if it does anything. Horrible lighting in this spare room. I never come in here. Jesus. Hopefully, there you go. My red mug is back. So Madeira, fortified wine, a cousin of sherry, but in terms of what it does to the whiskey, I think it's more of a less dominant flavour than sherry, and it's maybe a little bit more perfumed. In my shortcut in my head, I would say it has a floral sherry effect on the whiskey.
I always get a nuttiness personally. I get real kind of like praline notes out of it. But floral's really good as well.
But yes, I hope you like it. That still is readily available. We deliberately did a big batch to see us through most of this year, probably. But yeah, I'm a big fan of it. It's something that we've invested in more of. We've got much more Madeira sitting, maturing away, and it's it would seem like it works well in peated and unpeated spirit as well. So, there'll be more of it to come at some stage. It's not necessarily going to be an annual release, but as you're building out your database, as you're filling your warehouses, when you're a new distillery, you're just learning and you're just saying, right, I've got a good handle of what bourbon does to my spirit. I now know what PX and Oloroso does to Ardnamurchan very, very closely. Pardon me. Now I know what Madeira does. And you're just slowly making choices about what you might buy in the future and what direction it might take your spirit in, because it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. So you don't want to buy something and then find 3-4 years down the line it's been a huge mistake, you know.
Any thoughts from the room? We've had really good comments in the chat. Loads of really good tasting notes coming through on there. Anyone else want to share while we're before we go on to the next one?
It's absolutely amazing, this one. It's right up my street. Like the sweet and peat thing just works for me all the time. I love, I'm looking forward to the rum cask one as well. I always really like sort of peated things with rum casks as well. So it just works really well.
Yeah, I'm now terrified I've got it completely the wrong way around, but we shall see.
Well, why don't we see? Unless anyone
Let's
else
see.
Any
Yeah, unless there's any other comments.
I've got an off the ball one. You know me. Because I'm not an Islay fan at all, as those who know me know. But I just wonder whether, if you were going to be a peat tester, whether you could tell where peat had actually come from. Because I just wonder now, thinking about it, whether there are more kind of salts and things actually in the Isle of Peat, which also then give it that very distinct flavour, as opposed to, as you say, an Aberdeenshire one, which is obviously a much softer kind of air in Aberdeenshire compared to Islay. It's an interesting thought. And I'll shut up now.
I remember being told about Lefroy in particular. Is apparently Lefroy request a specific type of peat from a specific area because it's got essentially it's got more greenery in it. So it was more green vegetal matter which was being compressed and became part of the peats, which is why Lefroy comes across more, say, swampy as some of the other distilleries, even though they're on Islay, because of literally what is compacted within that peat. So I mean, Graeme could probably elaborate on this better than I can, but I am aware that there are because of the matter that's within this peat around the country as a whole. You can get to a stage where you can almost regionalise where particular peat is coming from.
Yeah, I would say peat has regionality more than almost any other ingredient in whiskey. You know, I'm quite wary of the T word, the terroir, when it comes to whiskey, if I'm honest. But you do have identity and you do have sense of place, definitely, in certain ingredients. And peat is very much like that. But yeah, I wasn't joking when I said it's unbelievably complex. There's a guy called Mike, I'm struggling with the second name now, is it Mike Billett, who wrote a book about peat quite recently. If you want to Google in the background, Ben, it's a wonderful book. We sell it at the Distillery Visitor Centre. If you search for Pete and Mike, I'm sure it'll come up. But he did a real deep dive into peat. So if you want to get stuck into that, it's really interesting, because it's also even... There is peat and whiskey, the Unbreakable.
Yeah, peat and whiskey, Mike Billett. So if I share...
Mike's fairly active on the internet and very approachable too. And yeah, it's a great book. And the details about it are quite unbelievable. So yeah, it's worth a wee look. And yeah, I think it's just that thing, as you get on with your whiskey journey, you realise black and white rules and big generalizations never stand up to scrutiny. If you say that you only drink single malts, or you only drink unpeated, or you only drink 10 years and above, or anything like that, then honestly, you're just plain wrong. You're just missing out on certain things. You just, at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in if it tastes good, then drink it, and then you can open up your eyes to so many other things in the whiskey world and the booze world as a whole. That's an interesting one, Stephen, saying regions are the biggest myth. I do agree with you almost entirely on that. I think we're in a post-regional whiskey world now where certainly things like Speyside, what does Speyside mean? You can't just say Speyside is the soft part of whiskey now because I don't know if it ever was, but distilleries make peat, they make unpeated spirit, they do all sorts of different styles of really weighty, heavy spirits in every region, and light delicate drams and everything in between. But what I would say, as we move on to the rum cask, we do want to fit into our whiskey neighbourhood. So if you think about where I showed you on the map, I think the Western Highlands does have a certain flavour bracket that it falls into. So if you zoom out from Ardnamurchan, you'd be pretty close to Talisker, which Ben mentioned earlier with the pepperiness and an undeniable coastal quality, pretty good intensity on the Talisker. Diageo haven't always been particularly kind to Talisker with their official releases, but it is a wonderful top tier spirit when it's when it's treated well. If you go further down the road, you would get to Fort William, which is Ben Nevis Distillery, of course. Not the most enjoyable distillery visitor experience sometimes, but incredible.
Don't get me started on Ben Nevis.
Oh, really? It's
oh my God!
It's a 1970s diner attached to a crumbling distillery, but
they never have anything in stock.
Indeed, yeah. And there's always rumours. I'm quite friendly with one of the tour guides there, and she's been promised that they will be allowed to do hand fills and single casks at some point, but I don't know what point. But yeah, Ben Nevis is rightly revered by the whiskey geeks. It's got a good level of intensity. It's quite dirty as well at points, and it can be pretty funky too. Then if we go further down, you've mentioned as well Tobermory and Lechaig especially, Ben, and then further down to the Campbelltown Peninsula with Springbank and Glen Scotia and Kilkerran. Not mentioning Islay. Islay is Islay, and we don't emulate that flavour at all. It's not something we're trying to copy, and it's not something we could copy unless we bought a bunch of Islay peat. But if you bracket the rest of those drams together, they do have some similarities and some overlap. And I think when we were building our place, we wanted to, if we achieve what we're looking for, we want to slot into that Western Highland whiskey world and to
the thing is, like with Nickneen, but like Nickneen's obviously very close to Ardnamurchan, and I would say that the two spirits are really, really different.
Yeah. No, I was thinking that as you were going through that map, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, Talisker, Toravec, and again another one, and I was like, Nickneen is totally different. That's the outlier of what I suppose you would call that region. Is Nickneen is the one that's not fitting into that to that kind of.
That's right.
Windswept, as Stephen puts it, that kind of category.
And I should say, that's no mistake on my part. I didn't forget to mention Nickneen, and I should also make very clear I do really like what they do. But yes, they are definitely not a stereotypical Western Highland dram. They're much more delicate, much more floral, much more cask forward as well. But you don't have to try to fit into your region. But for us, I think it was the right choice. It made sense for us. And sometimes you set out with a goal of what your flavour might end up being. You almost inevitably don't go down a straight road to get to that point. So it's an interesting one to see how it does appear with what maybe Alex planned 10, maybe 15 years ago when he was designing the distillery. It would be great to hear more from him about how close he thinks the spirit now aligns with his vision back then, So shall we try a wee rum cask?
Too late, I finished it.
Yeah, this will be a bit different to the previous one.
I think so. So for me, this is the wee turquoisey one. You can't quite make it out here, but I'll show you on the screen again. This one came out in 2023, so it's a real pleasure to see it on the lineup and to revisit it for me. because I'm as guilty as anyone for I buy the hot new dram in my stable and outside of it, and then I get obsessed with that for a few months, and then it goes in the cupboard, and then I've always got something new. I've always got a new Ardnamurchan to play with, and it's nice to go back and realize, do a deep dive, and also I'm not caught up in the release hype around this because it's not new anymore. So now I can go back really clear-eyed and say, well, how does this compare to my memories of when we launched it? So the first thing to say with rum is it's interesting, Ben, that you were saying that it might be sweet. And actually, the interesting thing here is we didn't set out to make a sweet Ardnamurchan with this. So what we have here is Jamaican rum casks. Hopefully, I would expect you've got some rum knowledge in the room tonight as well. But Jamaican rum, this is Appleton Estate, by the way. So Jamaica is known as the big, mad, super intense, high ester, way over the top. Really, when we talk about funk, whiskey is important.
Yeah.
Whiskey has borrowed that word from other industries like wine and in particular rum. Funk is often in my mind is more associated with kind of these high ester Jamaican rums, and also almost like a plasticine kind of note. It's quite hard to put your finger on what it is sometimes. If you have
overripe bananas is the one I get.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah.
If you've tried a big Hampden Estate or any of the big Jamaican ones, you will immediately remember what high ester is. But Appleton Estate, you could probably argue, is more of the milder Jamaican rum. It's a context thing, so it's still quite a good intensity there. But when we were buying rum casks, we wanted to find one that's not just loaded with typical Caribbean caramel flavour. I'm quite a rum nerd as well, I should say. And in theory, when you're buying a new cask type, you're wanting to pair it with your spirit and you want to think what it might do. And what we hoped it would do, and what I think it did do, was it bumped up this Western Highland thing that I was talking about. And where it took our salinity and our coastal edge, and particularly this farmyardy background, and it gave it a push, and it sort of enhanced that. It does have certain sweetness, but if you ever get the chance to try like single cask independently bottled rums, they aren't actually sweet. And sugar cane or molasses, when it's distilled, it isn't necessarily just a sweet new make. Actually, if you've ever been in one of these countries where you get the chance to drink sugarcane juice, it's not sweet at all. It's sugarcane is basically a type of grass, so it's very green, it's very grassy, it can be very vegetal, it can be pretty savoury at times, and I think actually if you take the Jamaican style, that kind of typifies that flavour. So I'll show you the spec sheet on this one. I'll keep clicking on it. There we go. So this was a bit of a smaller batch, 8,500 bottles. And check out this. I forgot this. The appearance, which is really just saying colour. Autumn birch leaf. Somewhat.
Was that one of yours?
I can blame my colleague for that. That was not me. I'm going to go and be sick in a bucket after reading that.
It's late summer birch leaf at best, I would say.
Yeah. It's definitely not autumn. It's Indian summer birch leaf.
Yeah.
Do you know what you'll notice in a lot of our notes is ridiculous confectionery, Kaiserschmarrn. Like, I don't even know what that is, but that's obviously some sort of German baked good, I think. But we do go pretty heavy on the confectionery and the world cakes and bakery goods and things sometimes. So what we really want to zone in on here is the breakdown of peated and unpeated. So it's not too far away from the last one, but again, re-racked into the rum, okay? So this was just over 15, 16 months in the rum, I believe, maybe just up to 20 months in the end there. And there's a couple of fully matured bourbon casks in there. Well, there's 3 of them in the end, in a way to restrain that rum from going too far. I think when we do these cask releases, I'm always wanting to do a twist on Ardnamurchan, but it should still taste of Ardnamurchan distillery. I want the DNA to be prevalent the whole way through. So hopefully when we get to the end of the night, we can still say they all taste like they were from the same distillery, and these casks had an undeniable influence on them. But the cask should still be a secondary influence. It shouldn't be the first thing that you're and the only thing that you're tasting. And you will maybe notice as well 55% ABV this time. So we went a little bit higher on the ABV. We've never gone below 46. We never will, I hope. But we often do 50 plus for the limited releases too. But yeah, I'll be very interested to hear if you agree, if you think I'm on that Jamaican rum note is coming through, or do you still find it's got some sweetness to it? Because in my mind, this is actually one of the less sweet Ardnamurchans that we've done, and it's a little bit more dirty. It's a little bit more, grassy, I think would be the word.
Funky. That is Kaiserschmarrn. Now, I Googled it, but Jane had already beaten me to it, and Jane may well have known that off by heart already. But yeah, apparently shredded, essentially like a fluffy shredded pancake that has either fruit or rum-soaked raisins in it as well. Maybe that's why, because of the rum-soaked raisins, that was why it was chosen as a tasting note. But yeah, Jane, did you know that already? No. she's quicker at Googling than I am. Fair enough.
Yeah, Google is my best friend.
Mine too. So if I just ask to unmute, any thoughts on this one?
It doesn't
definitely get that funkiness. Yeah,
it doesn't behave like any other rum tasted malt that I've had before. It's way different. It's like what people say, oh, don't like peat and smoke. Generally, I find rum stuff doesn't quite work with for me, but this does, because it doesn't have the hallmarks. So yeah, I'm still very pleasant, very enjoyable. Bit sharp on the tip of the tongue. It's got the edge to it, but it's not got the standard characteristics that you'd expect. So yeah, it's nice.
I appreciate that. I think it's if we did our job right, we didn't want to make a rummy rum cask whiskey.
And you've hit the nail on the head on that, because if you were tasting this blind, to me, you would not go down that avenue at all.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword, if I'm honest, because there will be people who purchased it back then expecting a rummy rum cask, and they might have been disappointed. And I can probably admit to you, I think it's probably the most divisive release that we did when it came out. Probably still, even with everything that's come after it. I think this was the one that some people adored and some people it missed the mark. But the interesting thing is, as a producer, we're not necessarily trying to make safe whiskey, and especially with the limited releases, I really don't mind if some people dislike some of them, and that might sound a bit counterintuitive, but if people can recognize the quality, but maybe say, well, dram number 3 or 4 is not to my tastes, but 5 or 6 or whatever I really like, then I think that's a better, more interesting path to go down than trying to play it too safe, and then maybe just having 6 drams tonight that were all not too bad, but maybe none of them would be particularly exciting, So we're quite happy to accept critical feedback, and counterintuitively, I don't mind if people don't like some of my whiskies, but as long as there's something that you can get attached to, that's what I'm after.
I think you're right, Graeme. Like, if I did buy this one, but like if I bought it, it would be because I've had other like PT rum casks. As I said before, I really like that, like really like high sweetness thing with rum casks usually. And I maybe would have been disappointed that wasn't there. But then I would have been pleasantly surprised that it is actually a banging dram as well. So, so yeah, not what I would expect, but would probably be okay. And
fair enough. Yeah, anyway, it's one of those ones on the learning journey from the production side again. That we're very happy to hold our hands up and say we've we've made some mistakes. We've not got everything right. I mean, you'll have seen in the early days our branding was very different and very overpopulated with numbers and batch dates and bottling clues. And we listen to feedback, really. We genuinely do. When I'm saying at the start of the night, be honest with me, it's because I can report straight back to the team. And if we hear the same kind of aggregate of feedback, good or bad, we can just go back and say, hey, people have no idea what all these numbers mean. And then we say, okay, get rid of them. And we listen to the feedback, you know. So it's an important part of being in a small company. You can be pretty flexible like that.
I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a mistake, though, mate. Don't be so hard on yourself.
No, genuinely, this is right up my street. But as I say, be happy to. I would expect this one not to necessarily be everyone's favorite tonight, but I'm really happy we did it. We've got more of them sitting in the warehouse. I've also got a bunch of Foursquare rum casks from Barbados, and we can probably all agree Foursquare is the finest rum producer in the world. And you know what's interesting is when we do these Madeiras, these mezcals that we'll try later, these rums and sauternes and other things we've done, when we finishing in them, for want of a better word, we empty the casks, we put them in the bottle, and then we've got a bunch of those ready to go. And what do we do with them? Well, we fill them with new make spirit. So then you've taken the initial aggression out of the casks, you've taken the heat out, you've also had a better idea, a quicker idea of whether they're going to work or not. But it's all about balance, and it's all about keeping that distillery character there. So we can take these Jamaican rums, now bottled in 2023. Now I've got some 2-year-old refill Jamaican rum, which is fully matured with Ardnamurchan spirit. And then you're just constantly laying down this future release, you know. So we've got some Paul Lanois, that's 5 years full-time matured now. We've got some Madeira from 2022 that was fully matured in refill Madeira wood. So that will have a very different effect. I'm a big fan, a big proponent of refill wood as well. We don't always just use first fill. Many of the drams that we'll try tonight and in our range contain plenty of refill casks. And we do about 25 to 35% fillings every year now go into refill wood. But in theory, they need some more time, of course. But they can be the most complex drams. You know, if I have just an unlimited budget, just give me a 30, 40-year-old plus refill bourbon, something, a Tobermory, a Klein Leash, a Ben Nevis, something like that. And that's when you can achieve, you know, proper whiskey complexity. That as much as I hope you're enjoying the depth that Ardnamurchan has for a youthful dram, there are some things you can't rush, and you just can't shortcut your way to the complexity that a 20, 30, 40-year-old dram will have. So yeah, there's always something else in the warehouse for the future, and that's kind of the exciting thing about being a new distillery, right?
Got to wait. Some of us aren't that patient, mate. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And some producers aren't either. Yeah.
Aye, that's true. Okay. Shall we do a little side by side?
Let's do a little side by side. Yeah, if everybody's got 2 glasses each, this will be best to do, I think, definitely together. Because this was one where so when the 23 first came out, I'm a sherry bomb fan anyway, and I love heavily sherried whiskies. And then when you get that smoky element in there as well. So when this was first announced to be released, I had really, really high hopes. I was like, could not wait for this to come out. And I will put my hands up and say, when this launched and I tried it, I was a little bit. It wasn't quite as much of a sherry bomb as I was hoping it was going to be. And then the 2024 came out the following year, and it was almost like you'd gone, oh, Ben was a little bit disappointed, so let's put everything in that Ben really, really likes. because the 24 was doing everything that I really wanted it to do initially. But that's just me personally. And I'm really glad I kept the 23 back. I think it was actually bought more by mistake. I think I'd put it aside for something else, and then it never happened, or I'd forgotten. And I was going through a whole load of bottles and went, "Oh, I've still got this from last year."
Yeah.
So I had to, because you'll probably tell everyone, but I ended up having to write on biro because label wise, initially, it's not obvious which is which. So I wrote 2023 on one and 2024 on the other, just to make sure, but fully with the intention of, I really want to put these two on a tasting because I'd love to get other people's views on it. Because I wouldn't be surprised if people prefer the earlier version to the second, things like that. But I was very surprised how I was picking up quite a difference between the two.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, the first thing to say there then is yeah, this is them and they look the same. It just says AD Sherry Cask Release. But these numbers that I've talked about, which was, for example, AD 0523 is what I've got on here. That just tells you when it was bottled. So that number hasn't been entirely deleted. You can still see it if you ever have a bottle. This little tiny code here will say AD and the code, and it'll tell you when it was bottled. You can just look for the vintage, really. It'll say 23, 24, etc. This one says
How did I miss that?
SCRO, which I've not seen before. What does it say on last year's one? Same thing.
ADSCR 2024. Yeah.
Does it say it on the rums? ADRCR. Interesting. But of course, if you want to take it further when you actually have the bottle, scan this, and then you'll find the PDF that tells you everything. So, how do they differ? Do we want to dive in blind and come up with some suggestions as to what we think might differ? What I could say is that if I simplify some of it for you, 100% sherry matured, both of these. Peated and peated spirit for both of these. Both relatively young, both 5 years or under. Both the same ABV, 50% ABV. And both PX and Oloroso sherry in combination. We do have other sherry casks maturing away. When I joined the company, I was immediately asking Alex to buy some dry sherry styles like Manzanilla and Palo Cortado and Fino and things. And we have done, but they're still very young at the moment. So yeah, PX and Oloroso, fully matured, 100% sherry cask releases here. But I'd be interested to, before I reveal what the actual differences are, does anyone have any thoughts? I can see Peter's enjoying the 2024.
Yeah, see, I only because PX absolutely floats my boat and ticks my boxes and does all sorts of naughty things to me. I would probably hazard a guess that the 24 has a higher proportion of PX. Maybe slightly higher proportion, a bit more unpeated in there as well. But for me, it feels like more PX than Oloroso.
So
in the 24.
I'm going to have to look up. I'm actually going to scan my bottles and download the PDFs and look at the specific cask makeups here. But what we have on the first one, 2023, is 10 peated sherry butts and 15 unpeated sherry hogsheads. So hogsheads being 250 litres, right? So half the size of a sherry butt. Also, this, if it had an age statement, this would be 4 years old. So this is, at the time, was the youngest whiskey we had released. If we go to the second sherry, then we're on to, quite interestingly, 21 sherry butts. And that's it. Only sherry butts. And they're 5 years old. So it's a year older, but the casks are larger as a whole. So in theory, that could kind of balance out that maturation. But what I will do, this phone that I said I was throwing away, let me scan the back. And I want to do a proper deep dive into the cask vatting. Could find this on a spreadsheet somewhere, but this is what you do. So if you download, you're probably all familiar with this, but if you scan the bottle, it shows me everything, and that's focusing very nicely. But it shows me the bottle numbers, who bottled it, when they bottled it, all the tasting notes. And then these 5 sections here, I can see the barley variety, the field it came from, fermentation times, distillation readings, and then maturation. So if I click on maturation, it should download a PDF. And here it's telling me I've already got it on my phone. So I can download this, which is not just a white screen. Yeah, and this will tell me every single cask that we put into your glass. So let me just check what we have here. So
Do you want me to write down some numbers?
yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So of the, what did we say? It was 15 unpeated.
So this was the 2023, yeah?
So we've got 10 peated sherry butts. All of them are Olorosos, and all of them are Spanish oak.
Okay.
Then the 15 unpeated hogsheads, we have quite a combination. I've got some Spanish oak and some American oak. I've got only 2 PX casks in there.
Yeah.
Both Spanish oak, and everything else is Oloroso. But I've got I've got 6 American oak casks there, which would, in theory, be lighter on color and different in flavor.
Yeah.
So let's go to the big brother, the big sister, and we'll see how that differs. Also, the first one was about 14,000 bottles. The second one is about 21,000, so it's a bigger batch as well.
It was 22 casks for the 24?
21, I think.
21.
Yeah, 21. And it says,
and they were all butts as well.
Yeah, it says 90% Oloroso and 10% PX, but I'll just double check to make sure. So interesting. As the year went on, we've got more detail here. This says re-rack on some of them too, which we didn't have available to us last time. So there is PX and Oloroso, but this is possibly the interesting one. There is no American oak whatsoever. It's all Spanish oak. And this is 2018s and 2019s. So this is a 5-year-old, if it had an age statement, but there is some 6-year-old in there as well. So we dial that information back down. The first one had some more American oak. It had some more wood influence in terms of the hogsheads, but it had less time in the wood. It was only 4 years old. The second one, it is darker if you hold them up side by side. On the screen they look the same, but when I'm holding them side by side, the second one is much darker. The peat and the unpeated makeup is pretty much the same. So yeah, I think it's interesting because it's showing you that when we're doing an annual release, we didn't just sit down and say, and by the way, at the time, I was very, very happy with 2023, and the general feedback was certainly very good, and we were very happy with how it was received. So we didn't just sit down and say, do that recipe again. We like to still play with things, and we like to try and introduce different combinations in there if we can do as well.
Oh, my feedback on it is totally personal. It's and that's because I really like big, like a PX. The more PX you can put into a sherry cask release, the happier I'm going to be. So it was one of those where I had a preconception of almost like I knew what I wanted from a Ardnamurchan sherry cask, and the 23 didn't quite get it, but the 24 has. So everybody's happy.
It's very interesting because I was kind of referring to that with the rum as well, when we're almost the double-edged sword thing, where we're when we did the sherry. And by the way, we resisted doing a 100% sherry cask release for 3 years. In theory, that might have just been an easy release to just put together, and in theory, this would be more of a crowd pleaser than a rum or a Madeira or for example the champagne ones that we've been doing as well. But we resisted going down just the obvious route. We had some lovely sherry casks, and we've been doing single casks of sherry releases for a long time. But we didn't want to just do the big nuclear sherry bomb. And again, balance is the word. I'm obsessed with balance. I'm obsessed, whether that's on the Adelphi side or the Ardnamurchan side. Distillery profile is what I'm all about. So even this year's one looks like a big sherry bomb. I still don't think it's over the top with sherry. We were wanting to be restrained with it. I don't think it's gone down the rubbery, sulfury route at all. Feel free to disagree with me, but I don't think that's in there. But even in terms of the tannins and the drying texture that you get from sherry, I don't think it's gone too far. I mean, yes, it's 4 years old and 5 years old whiskies that we're trying here, but we didn't want this to be a big strip the inside of your mouth out with the tannins of the cask. So yeah, it's interesting because you are very correct to say this was not a sherry bomb, but I can also say we didn't set out to make a sherry bomb. So it's an interesting.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting
And if you'd have told me that to start with, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So, out of interest, then I can see 10 people on the screen outside of myself and Graeme. So, just put your hands up if you have a preference for the 23. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, and the 24.
Everybody got brave as it went on there, eh?
Yeah. Peter, yeah, we already had Peter for the 24. So I think it's ended up being a tie, actually, which is fascinating stuff. Because as you say, it would have been very easy for you guys to go, well, we'll just do the same thing again. And you would have seen, obviously, that development of age. But I think the differences between the two aren't just the fact it's slightly older stock.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah. But I think both of them are very good. They've got a subtle difference between them. And yeah, it is hard to choose. And somebody will say, oh, yeah, I like this or I like that. You're splitting hairs between them at the end of the day. They are both very good.
Yeah, but you know that's because we're nerds. That's what we do.
Well, yes, exactly.
Hey, I love
the night. If you like,
hear them.
Sorry,
sorry, Stephen.
Tomorrow night I may change my mind. It's one of those.
Oh, it depends what you've eaten, what you've drunk for your tea or whatever. It's what mode you're in. Yeah. And you might like it one night and then decide the following day, no, I prefer the other one.
Nobody loses out of this. That's for certain. It's they're both absolutely brilliant. I always find it fascinating trying things like this side by side, whether it's different casks or different vintages or anything like that, because a lot of people will just see, oh, it's the sherry cask release. Yeah, I like the last one, and they buy it, but without being able to kind of go back and see actually doing that and go, wow, there is actually a difference between these. But then it relies on somebody like me actually just putting a bottle to the side, going, I need to remember that we're going to compare this later on, and then not open it and not do anything with it.
We'll thank you for that.
Well, yeah, we also need to be, or we've become better at doing that over the years as a producer, where we archive our stock more in a more organized manner. The Adelphi archive is atrocious. We've got some bits and bobs from the past, and we've learned from that mistake. Where other companies, you can go and do these old vertical tastings and try, like all of the Kilkerran work in progresses and things like that, And so we're trying our best when we do an Ardnamurchan release to do at least 12, maybe more like 36 bottles of each just gets put in the cupboard. And then, 10 years down the line, we can do the full sherry tasting, or we can do the full, try the inaugural versus the 10 years down the line and see how they have incrementally changed at the time. But then when you have that decade of separate, sometimes you can say, yeah, very different actually.
I love the Adelphi storage.
Foresight and dedication takes a lot of doing.
Yeah, it's also the really sad pragmatic truth is we're just not that organized. You know, that's the other thing with an independent company is we don't have someone who's just very often, like the mezcal is very, very nearly sold out on my side. And I just remembered last week to message someone in the office and say, did we archive any of that? You know, and if I waited another 2 months, it would be like, well, no, we didn't, and it's gone, so too late. But we just have to try and make it part of our daily release schedule that we chuck some aside and leave it alone. So, sorry, Jane, did you have a comment to make there as well?
I was just going to say, I think the 23 is much sweeter. There's a bit more caramel on it. These guys know this, and I'm fed up moaning about it, but I have long COVID and it really affects my taste buds. So some nights I can taste everything, like tonight. Other nights I struggle, but I definitely prefer the 23.
Okay. I think Julian's got an interesting tasting note there where you were saying 24 was more minty. I'm very happy to see that word appear because we have recognized this in our spirit from the very early days. We talk about mint and we actually talk about like eucalyptus and things as being you could say like a tertiary note. It's very much embedded. It's not in your face, but it comes up time and time again with our spirit in the warehouse when we're sampling things, and we get this mouth cooling kind of effect and this brightness as well. And I think that's the sort of thing where we can go right down the rabbit hole of peat, and we can go right down the rabbit hole of coastal flavors and salinity and all this. Some of these flavors you just don't know where they appear from, right? And I don't know where we are introducing mint in the chemical equation, but it is there, and it is something that's in right across the board with our spirits.
Yeah, Graeme, I got that from the off. Sorry, man.
No, go for
it. Yeah, so as soon as I put my nose into the glass, I don't have the 24, but I've had a couple of bottles of the 23, which I absolutely loved, and it was just an immediate sense of putting your nose in the glass and just getting this big minty sense. Really interesting. Very just dominated everything to start with.
Yeah,
we got past, as it were.
Sure. Yeah. It can be. It's quite a volatile note, so it does probably evaporate quite quickly as well sometimes. But
it's interesting you said that, Julian, because I've just taken a little sip of the mezcal, and it just explodes with eucalyptus more than anything else. I think the mezcal brings out even more. So
yeah, the mezcal
really good timing to kind of bring that up. It's
yeah. You need to tell us where the mezcal is going to have another batch sent to. I need to know.
Well, you've set me up nicely then. So shall we? We'll leave the sherry behind for now, but that should be an annual release now. So we should do the sherry. Again, like the Madeira, we did a big batch so we could see ourselves through.
Oh, damn. If I'd have known, I would have put another 23 aside, and then we could have done a vertical of the sherries.
Could have done the hat trick, yeah.
Damn.
Definitely that should be an option for you under RRP, possibly, Ben. Oh.
Well, yeah, actually, thinking about it, yeah. I'll have to keep an eye out.
You'll be able to pick one up. Although I don't know if auction sites would differentiate between the 2023, so be like zooming in, and you know.
You would need.
Well, now I know where to look, so we're okay.
They would need
you're talking to somebody that spent about 40 minutes in a Lego store scanning QR codes on F1 cars to get the right one for my daughter. So I'm happy to zoom in on a picture on an auction site. That's fine, mate.
Great.
Yeah, it'd be a great lineup to do 23 to 25.
We will move on to the mezcal. What to say about this? Well, right off the bat, I am very happy for people to not like this, but I'm also going to stand here and say, out of everything we've ever released, so the 10-year-old is genuinely my favorite Ardnamurchan that we've done. The mezcal is the second. I think it's way up there in the top 3 for me, easily, but I'm also going to explain to you why it's in my personal kind of tasting note field. I absolutely love this, but last night I had a very interesting tasting, about 30 odd people in Newcastle, and I think 10 people voted it for their favourite. But when they were doing the votes, I also interrupted and said, who thinks this was their least favourite? And 10 people said it was their least favourite dram as well. So it's very much a non-people pleaser. But if you allow me to explain a bit about it, I don't think this is as divisive as it may appear on paper. You know, when you first read about this, you might think it's going to be a real weirdo, but I think actually this is a very archetypal West Coast peated dram. So we'll see how you find it. So put your hand up if you like mezcal. Good. We're in the
Put your hand up if you don't know what mezcal is. Now I don't know if Peter doesn't know what mezcal is or if he likes mezcal.
Well, if we go down the very, very, very truncated rabbit hole, agave spirits, Mexican distillates, a close cousin of tequila. So tequila and mezcal are very underappreciated in the Western world. They are very possibly correctly appreciated in the UK because we often are introduced to tequila, especially. We don't normally even necessarily drink mezcal in the UK until we become fully fledged booze geeks, right? But our first encounters with tequila are often Jose Cuervo or some similar cheap brand tequila jelly shots I'm seeing from Stephen, yeah. And they are correctly judged to be terrible. And it clouds our opinion on that spirit category for a while. But if we bear with it and we get back into the world of trying to appreciate the quality of any spirit, you can actually realize that good tequila, proper 100% agave spirit, is a whole other thing, and it's a completely unique flavored spirit. That's what I would say about it. Whether you like it or not, tequila and mezcal do not taste like anything else in the world, and they are endlessly fascinating to me. They are also arguably some of the most artisanal spirits left in the world, particularly mezcal. So they are made from the agave plant. So really, a lot of their maturation is happening in the plant stage. They typically don't mature their spirit for very long, if at all. And the real, I guess, the generalization or the shortcut to make would be that mezcal is where they take the agave plants, they take the heart of the agave, which can take between 10 and 30 and beyond years to mature and to be ready to process. And they cook them. They need to have access to the sugars as well, like we do in the whiskey world. And in mezcal, you traditionally cook them underground. You cook them in a pit. So you line the pit with embers. You bury your agave plants, the pinas, the heart of the plants, in an earthen pit. And you smoke them for a day, for 2 days, for 3 days. And then you take them out and you make a beer or a wine, and then you distill it, and then you have your product at the end. But mezcal, as a very, very general rule, you could say it's a smoky tequila. Really, I would describe it as an earthy tequila rather than a smoky one. But the key characteristics of tequila and mezcal, if you've not tried any, and if you have tried any, I think you'll pick this up quite quickly. On the nose, for me, this does smell like agave spirit to begin with. But if you've never smelt it or tasted it before, agave spirit is it's described as being vegetal. It's quite green again. You get things like bell peppers, you get lots of grassy notes again, but you also get this really nice vibrancy. It's a very bright, lively spirit. And it's very, yeah, it's very unusual to our Western palate sometimes. We're not often used to it, but it's a really lively, bright, good intensity, very clean spirit. And even mezcal with a bit of smoke there, it's so full of life. It's quite a volatile spirit too. And for me, it's very, very interesting. So you get mezcal. For us, we've not been allowed to use mezcal casks for a long time in the industry. And as a purist, maybe I wouldn't even agree that mezcal casks should even exist, to be honest. If I'm telling you from my non-Ardnamurchan side, if I'm recommending you go and try some agave spirits, I would say try them unaged, try the Blanco spirits, and they can be the most typical examples of the DNA that you get. And mezcal, when I say it's a truly artisanal spirit, much of this does not leave, never mind, it doesn't leave Mexico, it doesn't leave the hillsides on which it is created. These are tiny operations sometimes, fifth, sixth, seventh generation distillers, and they've got tiny little pot stills producing 10 liters a day, and then they drink it, and it doesn't leave the area. So it's been a relatively new thing in the world that you can actually export mezcal, and it is expensive as well. I should add that. I don't know what your agave range is like, Ben, if you happen to have mezcal on your shelves.
It's an interesting one. I mean, for years people have said like, "Oh, tequila's the next big thing," and certainly in the celebrity world, any celebrity worth their lime and salt will have a tequila out.
Oh.
But hey, and literally just came out with that as well. My agave shelf is a bit limited, mainly because what seems to happen is it's popular in London. It tends to then make its way up to Manchester and then kind of works its way across the country. So there are people becoming more interested in it. I did a agave tasting 2 years ago, which went down really well. And I do get people saying, "Oh, we'd like to do an agave tasting. We'd like to find out more." There's not quite enough people to be able to really kind of go, yes, I would get enough people to kind of essentially cover the cost of doing it. But I have grown to love the category. I'm fascinated by mezcal and everything. So mezcal is the category, but then there's things like Racia and Bocanora and all these other kind of like really obscure little things which are just doing totally, and the flavor profiles are incredible. And actually, trying this, I would be really tempted to put this on an agave tasting, almost not telling anybody what it is, because there are mezcals out there that do come across quite whiskey-ish, and people have said like, "Oh, I like whiskey and I really like this particular one," and this would be a really interesting one to put on an agave tasting for people that are sort of, experts and nerds of the category, to kind of get them to pick out what it is, because this really is almost like both worlds combined. This is a whiskey for mezcal drinkers and like an introduction to mezcal as a category to whiskey drinkers. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting spirit. I'm very happy, as I say, for people to not have experienced mezcal. It's the sad truth is, to buy a good mezcal, you're very likely to have to go north of £100 a bottle, and it's not touched a cask even. So it is a hard sell sometimes, but a wonderful thing to look at if you get the chance. I would love to go to Oaxaca, where they produce it there. My colleagues Carl and Connell got to go there last year, and I have slagged them off ever since because I didn't get to go on the trip, and it's a dream destination for any booze geek and or food geek as well. But yeah, it's a lot of information to throw at you again, but I think it's warranted to say just what the hell is this. So now that you've heard my mezcal diatribe, then I'll show you what the Ardnamurchan mezcal cask release actually is as well. So this is going to be the first one we've tried tonight, which is 100% peated spirit. So we made that choice early on of to be honest with you as well, we with Madeira, with rum, with sauternes, with sherry in particular, we buy 200, 300, 400 casks at a time. We buy containers at a time. With mezcal, we didn't have the option. We were offered like 25, 35 casks or something like that. And I said to Alex, yeah, let's do it. Me and my colleague Carl, who's from the US, where they get to see a lot more agave spirits, we were like, yeah, buy the casks. Let's see what they do. So down at the bottom here, we've got 19 casks, all bourbon to begin with, and then in mezcal for it was like 20, 22, 23 months in the end, nearly 2 years. 55% ABV again, and 100% peated spirit that went into them. So that's when we bought those, we had to decide what are we putting inside these casks. And we've bottled almost all of them. There's 19 casks here. We've got a couple left over, but the majority of them made the cut. So you'll see my tasting notes on the side here as well. This was my tasting notes, I mean, as in the group tasting notes, but I actually typed them up. So yeah, for me, I really do feel like the immediate thing is the mezcal on the nose, but it does disappear quite quickly. And once it disappears, now it's just an earthy West Coast peated Scotch. And yeah, I was really struck by this Granny Smith apples, this green sharpness that you got on the nose there, but also, yeah, green bananas, plantain, that kind of savory style. And honestly, I think if I was going to be really sacrilegious here, do you know what I would love to do? See this olive, brine, and capers that I've written on the tasting note? I would love to try this in a dirty martini and make a horribly sacrilegious drink where I do whiskey, dry vermouth, and a little bit of olive brine. And I think that would be possibly a pretty delicious dram. And I can also say that it makes a wonderful highball. If you mix this with Fever Tree, do a Mexican lime soda, a big hearty pour of this and some Mexican lime soda is quite the drink if the sun shines. So, but you'll see there we've officially mentioned the eucalyptus on this dram as well. So I wasn't just making it up. So yeah, 55% ABV. It's also a 7-year-old spirit, so it's a wee bit older than the last one that we tried. And I would love to hear what you think. It would be, as I say, be very happy to accept if you don't like it. But for me, it does exactly what I hoped it would do. I tried this about 3-4 months after it went into the casks, and the mezcal was immediately there. But maybe counterintuitively, we left it a bit longer, and actually the cask settled down a wee bit, and the whiskey came back into it a little bit more. So yeah, this is very happily is the most the biggest outlier in the range today. It's almost entirely gone. It was only about 5,000 bottles, and yeah, I was happy with the result. But that doesn't mean you need to nod along and say I'm happy too. If you don't like it, it's okay. I've still got some in my house, so we can still be friends.
I was going to say, like, even after the sherry one and the eucalyptus notes, like for me, I do get that, but I don't think it's like eucalyptus or minty. It's the sweets of our Oddfellows. That's what I get.
Oh yeah,
and I get that a lot with Ardnamurchan. Is those Oddfellow sweets, which are kind of weird, like chalky, but like there is some sort of fragrant minty something behind them as well.
No, I like that. That's definitely correct. And yeah, you know, for me, it's a whiskey that goes up. It changes a lot. It's quite a chameleon. You know, it's very creamy as well. It's got a lot of vanilla there. It's pretty sweet. And like I said at the very start, even though it's 100% peated spirit, it doesn't really smell like, you know, it's not a big punch of smoke. On the palate, I think it's there more obviously, but. Yeah, I think could have been a disaster. Could have been the sort of thing that we bought the casks and we said, you know what, we're never releasing them. I've been to at least one distillery where I've tried a Tabasco cask, for example. You're not allowed to do them in Scotland, but I went to a world whiskey distillery once and tried their Tabasco cask, and they were also happily saying to me, we will never release this. It is wildly bad. So we may get to the stage where we buy some casks and they just don't work with our spirit, but we've been quite lucky so far that we haven't done that yet.
Good, Graeme, I think it's really interesting. I think out of all the drams, it's got the minerality in there, but it sits in your teeth for ages.
Right, like, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Just so that, and it's I've tried mezcal a few times, and it's very mezcal. It's complete character. So I think it's really interesting, and I think you've only got to think about how long it stayed around. I didn't get a bowl, but it didn't stay around very long. So
Yeah, it's
a great contrast.
It's been a lovely one to, like, I was at a trade show in Glasgow on Tuesday, and there was a lot of the industry, as in my pals from other brands were coming up to me and saying, "Man, that mezcal was something, eh?" And I thought that's a nice a nice bit of good honest feedback from the industry, because they don't have to like my stuff. But as I say, plenty of people didn't enjoy it, and that's absolutely fine. This is really far away from our house recipes, our house style. This is not the DNA of Ardnamurchan necessarily. Although, like I said, I think this is quite a typical West Coast mineral dram. But yeah, there's room for these little 5,000 bottle releases that are just going to be here for a few months, and then they'll disappear. And I'd be delighted to do another one, but I don't have any more casks. We're literally trying to buy some more, and they're very hard to come by as well. So there's not going to be an annual mezcal release. It'll just be a little thing to do, and then in the future, I don't know what else have I got. We just filled some white port last week for the first time, which I think will be quite interesting. I don't always love the effect that especially red port, ruby port, and tawny and things have on whiskey, but I think white port could be quite interesting. We've got some Tokai casks. We've got some heavily peated malt as well, which we're looking forward to releasing later this year. So there's a few other things kicking around, but by and large, everything we've tried tonight is not the house recipe. We've gone down the cask release route tonight, which has been great fun, but they're not the typical Ardnamurchans that I would say, if you've never tried one, that I would say try this one as a reference point for my distillery.
And have you tried anything with any phenos? Because it might be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, we do have Fino and Amontillado and things. I've got almost every type of sherry, but a lot of the drier ones are less than 2 years old at this stage. And some of them have been fully matured from the get-go as well. So, yeah, I think on paper, I'm incredibly excited about them. I can think of some delicious, I remember a Bunnahabhain in Mantinea that was still to this day one of my favorite ever drams. So I think if we get the balance right of a proper dry sherry and our West Coast style, it could be quite the thing. So we're awaiting those results with quite good excitement.
Funny, I also have that a bit of Bunnahabhain. I think it was Manzanil, but I think it was a Stoisha. I think it was a peated one.
I got a little
I look for it.
I got a
One of
little
the 20 CL ones.
Yeah.
Impossible to find.
It was I kept the empty bottle. Is it in this room? I liked it so much I kept the empty bottle.
Was it one of the Warehouse 9 ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would either be Cask 506 or 509, I think. The two Manzanias that were out of this world.
I think it was a 16-year-old, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, those sort of drams that I think if we can ever get close to those, even to be in touching distance of those, I'd be absolutely delighted,
I was actually going to say, Bunnahabhain, I don't think it is very Islay, and I would put that in almost that category that you said, that sort of Western.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
well. They're very different to any other Islay. Even the peaty stuff is very different as well. So it's probably in that category almost.
Bloody as well. So they're experimental.
Yeah.
No, I like Bunna a lot. I think it's still probably my top 5 distilleries. I don't have a regular list, but Bunna, for a big global company, still knocks it out of the park, I think.
Absolutely.
So I have got some stock. Obviously, some of this is no longer available because it was a couple of years ago. But let me just make sure I've got the right one. So this is what I have in at the moment. And as always, there we go. As always, it will be a 10% discount if anybody did want to buy anything. I've got one Madeira left. Now, I've put the code up and it should be live. because something nearly always goes wrong whenever I do this. I've put the code up, and that will get you 10% off those 4. I've got one Madeira in at the moment, but there's a good chance I'll probably be ordering a couple more bits and pieces as well in the very near future. So if you did want to get a Madeira and that had gone, I get some. If I get when I get any more in, I will still give you the 10% discount for being on the tasting as well. But I've just got some sherry cask. I've got the core in, which is obviously different to the 10-year-old, but is just absolutely amazing stuff. And the cask strength launched 2 weeks ago, Graeme?
Yeah, that's right. And it's a bit of a departure from the previous ones, where it's the oldest one we've done so far. It's an 8-year-old. If it had an age statement, it's all 8 and above. So yeah, it's sneaking in there as one of the oldest Ardnamurchans so far.
Yeah, so I was feeling generous, so I've added that to the list. I wasn't feeling that generous because the Midgie 2 has just come out as well, but that has absolutely flown out. So I'm going to need to get some more of that as well. If you did want to get any that I've got in at the moment, you will get 10% off, and I've got that until the end of the month. So it's possible that somebody will be watching this on YouTube that's not even been part of the tasting, and they'll use the code and get that off, but probably shouldn't say that out loud, should I? If you go on the website, or if you're one of the locals and you do come in and buy a bottle, I'll give you that 10% off as well. Just out of interest, again, I'll do the hands up thing, because it was this one definitely split the room, was the mezcal. If you were a fan of this, raise your hands of the mezcal. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then if you weren't, I'm assuming the other 5. So it did literally split the room 50-50 by the looks of it, which is interesting. But as you say, mezcal can do that.
Yeah.
I am I'm very interested to put this on a mezcal tasting now, as a kind of a sixth. Yeah, as a kind of like an outlier surprise one that will really throw people. But yeah, mezcal and tequila, it's one of those that I think it suffers from that stereotype of, shots, shoot a belt with shots and lime and salt and all this lot, which is not how they drink it in Mexico at all. But it's a fascinating category, and the history behind it, as you say, the artisanal nature of it. These tiny distilleries. It's kind of, a lot of people associate moonshine with like these people in forests and everything, or these tiny little places, and it really is akin to that.
Right.
But really interesting to see. And we got a comment, Callum and Laura, who aren't on the video, who've gone really, really a fan of this, and that does actually make it literally 50-50. As a room splitter, it's done the job to a T.
It's a strange mission.
It's the usual thing, isn't it? It's either love it or hate it. And
yeah.
If you don't understand the background flavour to what it's going to impart, you're on a loser to start with. And tequilas and mezcal, now, I've never tried them, so I don't know what I'm basing it against. And it's going back to what we said at the very beginning of the evening. It's like, all right, with peat, with non-peat, where's the peat from? First question. All right, so where's the barley from? Is it West Coast? Is it East Coast? And what the concept of that is it a niche local farm product, and in that you've got a field to brew to distillation, or is it a case of I'm bringing barley in from top end of Scotland, lowlands, or wherever, which has again got vast differences, and you're distilling that? It asks too many questions, and it's mad. But it just opens up so many questions. And yeah, I've opened a can of worms.
But no, it's nice to do these releases from time to time. Just they could sit there in a specialist whiskey bar, and they could probably be one of among half a dozen bottles on the whole gantry that are actually even in the same world as that flavour. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But well, as I say, we're about to turn 11, and that's the exciting thing. I think if you've enjoyed what you've tried tonight, I think we're getting to grips with what we're doing nowadays. We have quite a focus on our vision and our sort of direction we want to go in, and yeah, we're only just getting started. I feel like we're relatively well established as a new distillery, but we are a new distillery at the end of the day. So I think that's the exciting thing, is what is the 15-year-old or the 20 or the 25-year-old spirit going to taste like? We just don't know yet. So we're eradicating those mistakes. We're getting better and more consistent. And yeah, if the early stuff seems like it's doing okay, let's wait and see what the old stuff's going to be like. That's what's really quite fascinating.
At the end of the day, you're going in the right direction.
We hope so.
We'll all disagree and say what our favourite is, and there'll be an odd one that we don't like, or some of us don't like.
Sure.
But of what we've had tonight, 4 or 5, absolutely bang on. I might not like the mezcal, but the rest of it, brilliant. I've got a bottle in the cupboard. I want to go and work out which one it is that I bought, because I bought it 4 or 5 years ago off one of Ben's tastings. I can't remember which one it is, and I haven't opened it.
We did a YouTube tasting a few years back, didn't we, Ben?
2023, because I was going through the old presentations and things like that, and I think with what with the kind of the schedule of your releases, it kind of feels like every couple of years is a good time to do it, because it feels like this is essentially 2 years worth of cask releases and things like that. It does feel like every couple of years to kind of come back and look at what you guys have done over the last couple of years, because they're it's consistently you keep saying we've made some mistakes, but you're arguably almost from day one of the most consistent quality distilleries all the way through. It just to kind of go back and go, right, this is the last 2 years worth, and we've got all these different things, and you've done little experiments and things like that. And if we start getting things like Pheno casks and Manthania and all this lot, then it's just to see the development of the distillery and the consistency is great, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's great to have your support as well, and I'll make it down and see you in real life very soon. I'm 2 hours north of you nowadays, so no excuse.
Well, you are closer, so it's literally down the A1, and you're here. So it'll be really good to see you. So thank you everybody that took part, and those watching subsequently. I hope you all really enjoyed it. I'm not going to do what I have done on occasions and kind of like pick the best out and everything like that. But Graeme, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody, your comments, feedback, tasting notes. It's been it's always really interesting to kind of get everybody involved and kind of get these different tasting notes and what those individual aspects that people that bring out that just go, actually I didn't get that, but now you've said that, I can't get anything but mint out of any of the releases now, so that's completely changed my my perception of Ardnamurchan. Like I say, I've got some stock available. If I do sell out and you're wanting to buy any, being on the tasting, I will still give that discount when I get it back in. Yes, maybe it'll be same time in 2 years' time, and we'll look at what you guys have managed to put out for us in 24 months. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for coming along tonight, guys.
Cheers, Ben.
Cheers.
Cheers all. Sláinte.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really good.